NATO estimates 7,000 to 15,000 Russian soldiers have been in 4 weeks of fighting in Ukraine, where the country's defenders have put up stiffer than expected resistance and denied Moscow the lightning victory it hoped for. A senior NATO military official on Wednesday said the estimate was based on information from Ukrainian officials, what Russia has released, intentionally or not, and intelligence gathered from open sources. The official spoke on condition of anonymity under ground rules set by NATO. Staggering Russian toll from Ukraine invasion accidentally revealed. A Ukrainian National Guard soldier inspects a Russian damaged military vehicle in Kharkiv, Ukraine, on March 16. When Russia unleashed its invasion on February 24 in Europe's biggest offensive since World War II and brandished the prospect of nuclear escalation if the West intervened, a swift toppling of Ukraine's democratically elected government seemed likely. But with Wednesday marking 4 full weeks of fighting, Russia is bogged down in a grinding military campaign, with untold numbers of no immediate end in sight, and its economy crippled by Western sanctions. US President Joe Biden and key allies are meeting in Brussels and Warsaw this week to discuss possible new punitive measures and more military aid to Ukraine. As Mr. Biden left the White House on Wednesday for the flight to Europe, he warned there is a real threat Russia could use chemical weapons, and said he will discuss that danger with the other leaders. President Joe Biden shakes hands with Colonel Matthew Jones, Commander, 89th Airlift Wing, as he walks from Marine One before boarding Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base on Wednesday. The war's economic and geopolitical shockwaves, with soaring energy prices, fears for global food supplies, and Russia and China aligning in a new world order with Cold War echoes, have reverberated across a planet yet to emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. In an apparent reflection of growing divisions in Russia's top echelons, top official Anatoly Chubey resigned, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told the Interfax news agency. Mr. Chubey, the architect of Russia's post-Soviet privatization campaign, had served at a variety of top official jobs over 3 decades. His latest role was as Mr. Putin's envoy to international organizations. Mr. Peskov would not say if Mr. Chubey had left the country. With his olive drab t-shirts, unshaven face and impassioned appeals to governments around the world, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been transformed into a wartime leader and Russian President Vladimir Putin's #1 antagonist. In this image from video provided by the Ukrainian Presidential Press Office, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky speaks from Kiev on Tuesday. Addressing Japan's parliament on Wednesday, Mr. Zelensky said 4 weeks of war had thousands, including at least 121 of Ukraine's children. Our people cannot even adequately bury their dead relatives, friends and neighbors, he said. They have to be buried right in the yards of destroyed buildings, next to the roads. Repeatedly pushed back by hit-and-run Ukrainian units armed with Western-supplied weapons, Russian troops are shelling targets from afar, falling back on tactics they used in reducing cities to ruins in Syria and Chechnya. Major Russian objectives remain unfulfilled. The capital, Kiev, has been shelled repeatedly hit, but is not even encircled. A man trains in a range in Lviv, western Ukraine. More shelling and gunfire shook the city on Wednesday, with plumes of black smoke rising from the western outskirts, where the two sides battled for control of multiple suburbs. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said at least 264 civilians have been in the capital since war broke out. In the south, the port city of Mariupol has seen the worst devastation of the war, under weeks of siege and armament. But Ukrainian forces have prevented its fall, thwarting an apparent bid by Moscow to fully secure a land bridge from Russia to Crimea, seized from Ukraine in 2014. A Ukrainian serviceman secures the area as Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, right, speaks during a press conference next to his brother, former heavyweight boxing world champion Vladimir Klitschko. Mr. Zelensky said 100,000 civilians remain in a city that had 430,000 people. It has been shattered by strikes from air, land and sea, and repeated efforts to get desperately needed food and other supplies to those trapped have often failed. They ate us for the past 20 days, said 39-year-old Victoria Totsen, who fled from Mariupol to Poland. During the last 5 days, the planes were flying over us every 5 seconds and dropped us everywhere, on residential buildings, kindergartens, art schools, everywhere. Displaced Ukrainians on a Poland-bound train bid farewell in Lviv, western Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky, speaking on Tuesday in his nightly video address to his nation, said efforts to establish humanitarian corridors for Mariupol residents are almost all being foiled by the Russian occupiers, by shelling or deliberate terror. He accused Russian forces of seizing one humanitarian convoy. Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk said the Russians were holding captive 11 bus drivers and 4 rescue workers along with their vehicles. The head of the International Committee of the Red Cross traveled on Wednesday to Moscow for discussions with Russian officials on humanitarian aid, prisoners of war, and other matters. The devastation caused by the conflict in recent weeks, as well as 8 years of conflict in Donbass, has been vast, Red Cross President Peter Maurer said. In this satellite photo from Planet Labs PBC, multiple civilian buildings burn amid Russian strikes on the Livoberezhny district of Mariupol. It is not clear how much of Mariupol is still under Ukrainian control. Fleeing residents say fighting continues street by street. In their last update, over a week ago, Mariupol officials said at least 2,300 people had, but the true toll is probably much higher. Airstrikes in the past week destroyed a theater and an art school where civilians were sheltering. In the besieged northern city of Chernihiv, Russian forces and destroyed a bridge that was used for aid deliveries and civilian evacuations, Regional Governor Vyacheslav Chaus said. Katerina Mitkovich, who arrived in Poland after fleeing Chernihiv, wiped away tears as she spoke about what she had seen. This satellite image provided by Maxa Technologies shows a close-up view of fires in an industrial area and nearby fields in southern Chernihiv on March 10th. The city is without gas, electricity or running water, the 39-year-old said, and entire neighborhoods have been destroyed. I don't understand why we have such a curse, she said. Despite plenty of evidence to the contrary, the Kremlin spokesman insisted the military operation was going strictly in accordance to plans. Russia wants to get rid of the military potential of Ukraine and ensure that Ukraine changes from an anti-Russian center to a neutral country, Mr. Peskov said. Officially, Russia is calling the campaign a special military operation. It has effectively outlawed terms such as invasion and war, and police have arrested thousands of anti-war protesters. But as casualties mount and quick victory is no longer in sight, Russia is having to work to shore up morale. Under a law passed Wednesday, troops in Ukraine will get the same benefits as veterans of previous wars, including tax breaks, discounts on utilities and preferential access to medical treatment. Western officials say Ukrainian resistance has halted much of Russia's advance, and Mr. Putin's forces are facing serious shortages of food, fuel and cold weather gear. Russia's military casualties are unclear, but even conservative Western estimates are in the low thousands. We have seen indications that the Ukrainians are going a bit more on the offensive now, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said. He said that was particularly true in southern Ukraine, including near Kherson. A Ukrainian firefighter holds a hose inside a house destroyed by in Kiev, Ukraine. But Russia's far stronger, bigger military has many Western military experts warning against overconfidence in Ukraine's long-term odds. The Kremlin's practice in past wars has been to grind down resistance with strikes that flatten cities, in countless civilians, and sending millions fleeing. Talks to end the fighting have continued by video. Mr. Zelensky said negotiations with Russia are going step by step, but they are going forward. With no peace, those not yet fighting prepared to do so. Shopping center shattered in Russianing. Everything's a bestseller these days, said Zakaslavsky, who owns a gun shop in the western city of Lviv. We're defending our land, he said.